The day had started like any other for Daniel Gray, a man known across the city as one of the richest businessmen. His face often appeared on magazine covers, his name echoed in boardrooms, and his wealth opened doors wherever he went. Yet for all his success, his life often felt empty, filled only with numbers, contracts, and people who wanted something from him. He lived in glass towers and dined under crystal lights, but his heart had long grown cold. That afternoon, tired from endless meetings, Daniel decided to step away from his world of power. Instead of dining at one of his luxury restaurants, he took a walk through the quieter streets of the old town. There was a small cafe he used to visit years ago when life was simpler, before money and power had consumed him. Something inside him whispered to go there, to sit down like an ordinary man and remember what peace felt like. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as he stepped in. The warm smell of coffee and baked bread wrapped around him. He inhaled deeply, almost smiling for the first time in days. The cafe was nearly full, the hum of chatter mixing with the clinking of cups. He removed his coat and searched for a quiet corner. But then, his heart stopped. Across the room, sitting by the window, was a woman he knew all too well. Her hair was tied back neatly, her face older but still carrying the same beauty he once adored. Time had not erased the softness in her eyes, nor the way she sat with grace even in the simplest clothes. It was Clara. Daniel froze in place. Memories came rushing back like waves hitting the shore. Clara, the woman he had once loved more than life itself. Clara, the woman he had left behind when he chose ambition over love. He had told himself it was for the best, that he couldn't offer her the future she deserved. But standing there now, seeing her after all these years, Daniel felt a sting in his chest, as if the years apart had meant nothing. Before he could decide whether to approach her, his eyes caught something else, something that made his blood run cold. Sitting beside Clara was a boy. No older than 6 or 7, his small hands gripped a toy car as he sipped juice from a straw. His laughter rang out, innocent and light, but what shook Daniel to his core was the boy's face. The child had the same sharp jawline, the same deep eyes, and even the same faint dimple that Daniel himself had when he smiled as a boy. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His body stiffened, his heart pounding wildly. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light, but no, the resemblance was undeniable. The boy was like a mirror of his own childhood. For a long moment, Daniel stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. 1,000 questions exploded in his mind. Is this real? Could he be mine? Clara hadn't noticed him yet. She leaned toward the boy, smiling softly as she fixed his collar. The tenderness in her eyes made Daniel's chest ache. It was a scene of love, of a mother protecting her child, a scene he had never been part of. Finally, Clara looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded cafe, and her smile vanished instantly. Shock spread across her face, followed quickly by fear. She froze just as Daniel had, the color draining from her cheeks. For a few seconds, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The clatter of cups, the chatter of voices, all of it faded into silence as they stared at each other, the weight of the past filling the space between them. Daniel forced his legs to move. Slowly, he crossed the cafe, each step heavy with emotions he couldn't name. When he reached their table, Clara immediately placed her hand on the boy's shoulder, her body tense like a shield. "Clara," Daniel said at last, his voice low but trembling. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at him with wide eyes, full of memories, regret, and something else, fear. Daniel's gaze shifted to the boy, who looked up curiously at the stranger standing before him. For a moment, Daniel felt as though he was staring into a mirror from the past. His knees almost gave way. Who is he?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. Clara's eyes darted away. She tightened her grip on the boy, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Daniel, don't." But he couldn't stop. His heart was racing, his mind spinning. Every part of him screamed for answers. "Why does he look like me?" he whispered, his voice filled with both wonder and pain. Clara's face turned pale, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The boy tugged at her sleeve, sensing the tension but not understanding. She stroked his hair, whispering softly to calm him, but her hands trembled. The cafe around them seemed to vanish. For Daniel, there was only Clara, the boy, and the unbearable truth he felt pressing against his chest. In that moment, Daniel knew his life would never be the same again. Whether Clara spoke the truth or kept it locked away, he had already seen it with his own eyes. The boy wasn't just any child. He was part of him, and Daniel wasn't sure if he was ready to face what came next. Daniel left the cafe that day with his world turned upside down. The image of the boy's face haunted him like a shadow that would not leave. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the child smile, the same dimple he once had, the same spark in the eyes that mirrored his own. It felt like a ghost from the past had stepped into his present. He tried to focus on work, on the calls waiting for him, the files piling on his desk, but nothing mattered. All he could think about was Clara. Clara, the woman he once loved more than anyone. Clara, the woman who once held his heart with her laughter and her warmth. As he sat in his office that night, staring at the city lights from the tall glass windows, his mind wandered back to years ago, when everything was different. He remembered the first time he saw Clara. She was standing in the library of their university, books pressed against her chest, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She wasn't like the others. She didn't chase wealth or status. She carried herself with a quiet strength that drew him in instantly. Back then, Daniel wasn't the man he was now. He wasn't a millionaire. He was just a young man with dreams too big for his pockets. But Clara never cared about that. She loved him for who he was, not for what he owned. They would spend long hours walking through the park, sharing sandwiches, dreaming of a simple life together. Those memories stung now, because he had thrown it all away. The turning point came when Daniel's ambitions grew heavier than his heart. He was offered a chance to work with powerful investors abroad. It was his dream, but it meant leaving Clara behind. "I can't come with you," Clara had told him, tears in her eyes. "I don't want a life built only on money. I just want you." But Daniel had been blinded by the promise of success. He remembered his own words, sharp and final, "Love won't pay the bills, Clara. If I don't take this chance, I'll regret it forever." Those were the last words they exchanged before he left. He never looked back, never tried to find her again. He told himself she deserved someone better, someone who wasn't consumed by greed. He buried the pain under layers of work, contracts, and endless nights in empty rooms. Yet now, years later, fate had dragged her back into his life, and with her, a boy who might be his son. Daniel clenched his fists as guilt rose inside him. Had she raised that child all alone? Did she struggle while he was building his empire? He had everything money could buy, yet he may have abandoned the one treasure he could never replace, his own blood. That night, he found himself driving through the streets near the cafe again, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, of the boy. He saw them walking together, Clara holding the boy's hand as they stopped at a small grocery shop. Daniel sat in his car, watching silently, afraid to approach. The boy laughed as Clara bought him candy, his joy so pure it made Daniel's chest ache. He looked like Daniel had looked when his own mother held his hand. The memories of his childhood rose, his mother's sacrifices, the way she raised him alone after his father abandoned them. And now, was history repeating itself? Daniel pressed his hand against the steering wheel, his heart heavy. "Clara," he whispered into the empty car. "Why didn't you tell me?" Back at his mansion, Daniel lay awake in the silence of his grand bedroom. The bed was wide, the room filled with expensive art, but none of it comforted him. For the first time in years, he felt lonely in the truest sense of the word. He closed his eyes and pictured Clara's face when she saw him in the cafe. She had looked frightened, almost protective. Protective of the boy. Which meant she was hiding something. But why? Was it anger? Did she hate him so much that she kept his child away? Or was it fear, that he would take the boy from her if he knew the truth? These questions burned in Daniel's mind, keeping him awake until dawn. By morning, he had made up his mind. He couldn't ignore this anymore. He had to know the truth, even if it broke him. Daniel rose from his bed, dressed sharply, and looked at himself in the mirror. For years, he had built his identity as a powerful millionaire, but in that moment, he didn't see power. He saw emptiness. For the first time in his life, business could wait. Deals could wait. What mattered now was the truth about the boy, the child who mirrored him, and the woman he once let go. Daniel could not take the silence anymore. Days passed, and every moment was filled with restless thoughts about Clara and the boy. His work meetings became meaningless, his assistants noticed how distracted he was. But he did not care. The only thing that mattered was finding out the truth. One evening, Daniel finally gathered his courage. He knew Clara still worked at the small bookstore near the cafe. He had seen her through the window, arranging books on the shelves, her face calm but distant. The boy was not with her that day, and Daniel thought it might be the right time. With a deep breath, he pushed open the door. The small bell above the entrance chimed, and Clara looked up. For a brief second, their eyes met, and the world seemed to freeze. "Clara," Daniel said softly. His voice cracked, betraying the storm inside him. She stiffened, her hands tightening around the book she was holding. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" Her voice was sharp, guarded. "I had to see you," he said, stepping closer. "I saw the boy. Clara, please. I need to know the truth." Her face paled, but she quickly turned away, busying herself with stacking books on the counter. "There's nothing for you to know. You shouldn't have come." Daniel's chest tightened. "Don't lie to me. That boy, he looks exactly like me. Clara, tell me. Is he?" "Stop." Her voice shook as she cut him off. She placed the books down and faced him fully now. Her eyes burned with a mix of anger and pain. "You don't get to come back after all these years and demand answers. You left, Daniel. You made your choice." "I know I did," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was foolish. I thought money and success would make everything right. But the moment I saw him, Clara, my whole world stopped. If he's mine, I deserve to know." Clara shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "You don't deserve anything. Where were you when I needed you the most? When I cried alone at night, wondering how I would raise a child without you? When I worked 3 jobs just to put food on the table?" Daniel's throat tightened. Each word she spoke was like a blade cutting deep into him. He wanted to speak, to explain, but guilt silenced him. Finally, Clara turned away, trying to compose herself. Her voice softened, though it carried exhaustion. "You walked out of my life, Daniel. And I built a world without you. That boy, he's happy. He doesn't need confusion. He doesn't need someone who left." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Clara, if he is my son, then I want to be there for him. I can't change the past, but I can try to make things right now. Please, don't shut me out." Clara closed her eyes, her body trembling. She wanted to scream at him, to push him out the door. But another part of her, the part that once loved him, hesitated. "He doesn't even know you exist," she whispered finally. "To him, I'm his whole world. If you come into his life, Daniel, everything will change. I can't let him get hurt." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then let me prove I won't hurt him. Let me prove I've changed." Her hands clenched. The battle inside her was clear. She wanted to protect her child, but the truth was impossible to hide forever. The boy's resemblance to Daniel was too strong, and one day, he might ask questions she couldn't answer. "Why now?" Clara asked suddenly, her voice breaking. "After all these years, why do you care?" Daniel swallowed hard, emotion raw in his tone. "Because when I saw him, I saw myself. And I remembered the boy I used to be, the boy whose father abandoned him. I promised myself I would never do that to my own child. And yet, maybe I already have. I don't want history to repeat itself, Clara. Not again." Clara's breath caught. For the first time, she saw the man in front of her not as the powerful millionaire everyone admired, but as the boy she once loved, broken, flawed, and aching with regret. Silence filled the room, heavy and unspoken. The only sound was the ticking clock behind the counter. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice low. "He is your son, Daniel." The words hit him like thunder. His knees felt weak, his chest heavy, but his heart soared and ached at the same time. He whispered, "My son." "Yes," Clara said, tears falling now. "But don't think this changes anything. You can't just walk back in and claim him. You'll have to prove yourself, to him and to me." Daniel nodded, his eyes wet. "I will. I promise you, Clara. I'll do whatever it takes." As he left the bookstore that night, Daniel felt both broken and alive. The truth was no longer a question, it was real. He had a son. And now, everything in his life had a new purpose. But he also knew it wouldn't be easy. Winning Clara's trust again, and earning a place in his son's heart, would be the hardest battle he had ever faced. Yet for the first time in years, Daniel was ready to fight, not for money, not for power, but for family. Daniel spent the next few days restless but determined. He replayed Clara's words in his mind. "You can't just walk back in and claim him. You'll have to prove yourself." Those words stayed with him like a challenge and a reminder of how much he had lost. For years, Daniel had been a man who could buy anything he wanted. But this time, no amount of wealth could help him. To win his son, He had to give something money could never buy: time, patience, and love. The chance came on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Daniel saw Clara and the boy at the park. The child ran ahead, chasing a red ball with laughter that echoed through the air. Clara sat on a bench, watching carefully. Daniel approached slowly, his heart pounding. Clara noticed him, her face tense, but she did not stop him. Perhaps she wanted to see what he would do. The boy's ball rolled too far, landing near Daniel's feet. Daniel bent down, picked it up, and smiled gently. "Hey, champ. This yours?" The boy looked up, his big brown eyes shining with curiosity. "Yeah. Thanks, mister." Daniel handed the ball back, his fingers trembling slightly. For the first time, he was speaking to his son, even if the boy didn't know the truth yet. "What's your name?" Daniel asked softly. "Ethan," the boy replied with a wide grin. "What's yours?" Daniel's throat tightened, but he forced a smile. "Daniel." Ethan tilted his head, studying him. "You talk like my mom's friend," he said innocently. "Do you know her?" Daniel glanced at Clara, who was watching carefully. "Yes," he said slowly. "I knew your mom a long time ago." Ethan accepted the answer with the innocence only a child could carry. He bounced the ball in his hands. "Do you want to play catch with me, Mr. Daniel?" For a moment, Daniel froze. He had faced boardrooms, investors, and critics without fear. But now, being asked by his son to play was the most terrifying and beautiful thing he had ever experienced. "I'd love to," Daniel said, his voice soft but sure. They played for nearly an hour. Ethan laughed every time Daniel pretended to miss the ball on purpose, and Daniel laughed too, realizing it had been years since he had felt so alive. Clara watched from the bench, her arms crossed, but there was a softness in her eyes she tried to hide. When Ethan grew tired, he ran back to his mother. "Mom, Mr. Daniel is really good at playing catch. Can he play again next time?" Clara's heart clenched. She forced a small smile and said, "We'll see." Daniel caught her gaze. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a beginning. Over the next weeks, Daniel made quiet efforts. He didn't rush. He didn't demand. He simply showed up. Sometimes he joined them at the park. Other times, he offered to buy Ethan ice cream or help him with small games. At first, Clara remained cautious, her guard always up. But she noticed something. Daniel wasn't just throwing money around. He was present. He listened to Ethan, he laughed with him, and he treated him with patience. One evening, when rain began to fall, Daniel insisted on walking them home with his umbrella. Ethan clung to his hand, skipping through the puddles. Clara walked beside them, silent but thoughtful. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man she used to know, hidden behind years of mistakes. Inside Ethan's small room, Daniel saw the drawings taped to the wall: houses, trees, superheroes. In one drawing, Ethan had drawn himself and his mom holding hands. Daniel's heart ached as he noticed there was no father in the picture. "Wow, you're a great artist," Daniel said, his voice steady but emotional inside. Ethan beamed. "Thanks. One day, I'm going to draw my whole family. With 3 people." Daniel's eyes flicked toward Clara. She turned away quickly, her emotions hidden. Later that night, as Ethan fell asleep, Clara stepped into the kitchen where Daniel waited. Her face was serious. "You're making him happy," she admitted quietly. "But don't forget, Daniel, if you leave again, it will break him. He's not strong enough for that. And honestly, neither am I." Daniel looked her straight in the eyes. "Clara, I'm not leaving this time. Not him, not you. I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'll earn it. Even if it takes forever." Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. For the first time in years, Daniel walked out of Clara's house with a sense of hope. He had shared laughter with his son. He had seen a light in Clara's eyes that told him the past wasn't completely gone. The road ahead would be long, filled with challenges, but Daniel finally knew where he belonged. Not in his mansion, not in the endless chase for money, but here, with them. And he was ready to fight for it. Daniel's bond with Ethan grew stronger with each passing day. What started as small games in the park turned into hours of laughter, stories, and little moments that touched Daniel's heart more than he ever imagined. For the first time in years, he felt alive in a way no deal or business success had ever given him. But Clara remained cautious. She watched him closely, measuring his every move. Deep down, she wanted to believe he had changed, but her wounds were not so easily healed. She had built her world around Ethan's safety. If Daniel broke that trust, the pain would be unbearable for both of them. The test came sooner than either of them expected. One evening, Clara received a call from her workplace. An emergency shift had opened up, and they needed her immediately. She hesitated, looking at Ethan, who sat on the floor surrounded by his toys. It was late, and she usually never left him alone. Before she could decide, Daniel spoke gently. "Let me watch him, Clara. Just tonight. You don't have to worry." Clara froze. The thought of leaving Ethan with Daniel made her chest tighten. Memories of the past still haunted her, memories of the night he left without looking back. But Ethan looked up, his eyes wide with hope. "Please, Mom. Mr. Daniel is fun. Can he stay with me?" Clara's heart wavered. Ethan's happiness mattered most, and Daniel had been nothing but patient these past weeks. After a long silence, she nodded. "Fine. But Daniel, listen to me. If you hurt him, even once, you'll never see him again." Daniel's voice was steady, his eyes filled with sincerity. "You have my word, Clara." When Clara left, the small apartment suddenly felt different. Daniel and Ethan sat together in the living room, a quiet warmth filling the air. "Can we watch cartoons?" Ethan asked eagerly. Daniel chuckled. "Of course." He turned on the television, but his eyes kept drifting to the boy. The way Ethan laughed, the way he clapped his hands, reminded Daniel so much of himself as a child. Later, Ethan pulled out a board game. "Mom always plays this with me," he explained proudly. Daniel joined in, pretending to struggle so Ethan could win. Each time the boy cheered, Daniel's heart swelled. He realized he didn't care about winning or losing anymore, he only cared about seeing his son happy. As the night grew late, Ethan grew sleepy. He curled up beside Daniel on the couch, his small head resting against Daniel's arm. "Mr. Daniel," Ethan mumbled softly. "You feel safe." Daniel's breath caught. The boy didn't know the truth yet, but his words cut deeper than anything Daniel had ever heard. He brushed Ethan's hair gently and whispered, "I'll always keep you safe, Ethan. Always." Moments later, the child drifted off into peaceful sleep. Daniel stayed still, unwilling to move, afraid to disturb the fragile trust that had just begun to form. When Clara returned hours later, she found them exactly like that, Ethan fast asleep, his small body leaning against Daniel, who sat silently, watching over him. Her heart softened in a way she hadn't expected. She had prepared herself to find mistakes, to find proof that Daniel couldn't handle responsibility. But instead, she saw something real. "You stayed the whole time," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes tired but peaceful. "Of course I did. He's my son, Clara. I'd never leave him." Her chest tightened at those words. She wanted to believe him, but believing meant lowering the wall she had built for years. Still, for the first time, she felt a small crack in that wall. The following week, another challenge arrived. Ethan was chosen to perform in a small school play. He had been nervous about it, and Clara promised she would be there. But on the day of the event, Clara's bus broke down, leaving her stranded miles away. Panicked, she called Daniel. "Please," she said breathlessly. "You have to go. Ethan will be looking for me. Don't let him down." Without hesitation, Daniel rushed to the school. He arrived just as Ethan stepped onto the stage, scanning the audience with worried eyes. When Ethan spotted him, Daniel raised his hand high and smiled proudly. The boy's face lit up, his nervousness melting away. He performed with confidence, glancing at Daniel again and again, as if drawing strength from his presence. Afterward, Ethan ran into his arms. "You came. I thought no one would be here." Daniel hugged him tightly. "I'll always be here, champ. Always." When Clara finally arrived, she saw the scene, her son glowing with joy, her ex-lover holding him like he belonged there. Tears filled her eyes. For years, she had carried the burden alone, convinced that Daniel had no place in their lives. But seeing Ethan's happiness made her question everything. That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, Clara looked at Daniel. Her voice was softer than it had been in years. "You didn't let him down. You didn't let me down either." Daniel met her gaze, his own eyes filled with hope. "I won't, Clara. Not this time." Weeks turned into months, and Daniel kept his promise. He showed up for Ethan, not just in big moments, but in small ones too. He helped with homework, attended soccer practice, and even learned to cook simple meals with Ethan laughing beside him. Slowly, The walls Clara had built around her heart began to weaken. She noticed the way Ethan's eyes lit up whenever Daniel arrived. She noticed the gentleness in Daniel's voice when he guided the boy through mistakes. She noticed that Daniel no longer carried himself like a man who wanted to own the world, he carried himself like a man who wanted to belong to one small family. And yet, doubt still lingered in her heart. Could she truly trust him again? The final test came on a stormy night. Clara had to work late, and Ethan insisted on waiting for her by the window. The thunder frightened him, but Daniel stayed by his side, telling him stories until his fear faded. "Do you think heroes are real, Mr. Daniel?" Ethan asked suddenly, his small voice serious. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, I do. But heroes aren't just in books or movies. Sometimes a hero is someone who stays, no matter what." Ethan tilted his head. "Like you?" Daniel's chest tightened, and tears pricked his eyes. "I hope so, Ethan. I really hope so." That same night, Clara returned home soaked from the rain. She paused in the doorway, watching the scene before her, Daniel sitting on the floor with Ethan asleep against his shoulder, both of them wrapped in a blanket. Her heart finally gave way. For years, she had carried the pain of abandonment, but now she saw the truth with her own eyes. Daniel was not the same man who had left her. He was here, steady and present, not with wealth or promises, but with love. The next morning, Clara asked Daniel to meet her at the park. She needed to speak, and this time, there would be no holding back. When they sat on the bench, silence stretched between them. Finally, Clara took a deep breath. "Daniel, I fought so hard to keep you away because I was afraid. Afraid you'd hurt Ethan. Afraid you'd hurt me again. But I see now, you've changed. You've shown up for him, for me. And maybe it's time I stop fighting what's right in front of me." Daniel's heart pounded. "Clara." She met his eyes, her voice trembling but steady. "He's not just your son anymore, Daniel. He's our son. If you're truly ready to stay, then stay. Not as a visitor. Not as a stranger. Stay as his father. Stay as my partner." For a moment, Daniel could not speak. His throat closed, his vision blurred. Then he reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "Clara, I swear to you, I'll never leave again. Not you. Not him. You are my family. The only family I've ever truly wanted." As if fate had been listening, Ethan came running from the playground where he had been playing. He leapt into Daniel's arms, his laughter filling the air. "Mom! Mr. Daniel is the best. Can he stay with us forever?" Clara smiled through her tears. She placed her hand gently on Ethan's head and looked at Daniel. "Yes, Ethan. He's staying." The boy's face lit up, and he hugged them both tightly. In that moment, the three of them stood together, no longer broken pieces of the past, but a family reborn. Time moved forward, and life changed in ways Clara had never imagined. Daniel didn't just visit, he became part of their everyday lives. He helped Ethan build a kite, fix things around the house, and shared meals at the small kitchen table that now felt warmer than any grand dining hall. Daniel's mansion remained untouched most days, gathering dust while his heart chose the tiny apartment where laughter echoed. For the first time in years, Clara felt safe. Ethan felt complete. And Daniel felt whole. One evening, as the sun set behind the horizon, Clara whispered as they stood together, watching Ethan play, "You know, Daniel, maybe we both had to lose each other once to understand what we really needed." Daniel pulled her close, his voice firm but gentle. "And I'll never risk losing you again." Clara rested her head against his shoulder, and together they watched their son chase fireflies, the sound of his laughter wrapping around them like a promise of a brighter future. The millionaire who once thought success meant wealth had finally found his greatest treasure. Not in money, not in power, but in love, in family. And this time, he would protect it with everything he had.